lot of people are now saying that whales are mammals because they have lungs. I don't believe that. I think they're still fish.
London. A town with over 100 books, yet some of the lowest literacy rates in the country. It was here, on opposite sides of the river, that Louis and I were born some 30 years ago, and it was time to return. However, owing to an inadequately ventilated bedroom on my part, and too many glasses of fizzy pop the night before on Louis's, we were both deeply sleep deprived.
Let's forage in a calm manner.
It was Providence then that we had a guide. Our old friend from the frontier days of YouTube, Yaseen, whose knowledge of the city is unimpeachable.
To be honest, I'm already lost.
Our journey would take us from Camden,
And it's closed, locked, with a padlock. So,
via Islington, where Louis was born, and where one can find the world's greatest restaurant,
excellent.
to St Pancras, where we would look back on the spoils of a hard day's forage.
We're just about to leave.
I was Welcome to Book Foraging.
You're like one of those bookstagrammers who show you a
That's
book
right.
with the pages facing you and they're like, this is one book you have to read if you're interested in crime, and they talk for like 40 seconds before they switch it around.
I've seen some TikTokers who don't even show you the cover. They've just edited it so badly that they haven't got to the point.
I don't want anyone to find out about this book. Here we are in Brunswick Square.
Yeah.
I bought some books. So this is, I've never heard of Anthony Lane before, but this is a massive collection of film criticism, which supposedly is written with acerbic wit and wry observations. It's, John Banville says, positively Nabokovian elegance.
What era is he writing about? Was it
Let me see. Sleepless in Seattle, The Fugitive, Indecent Proposal. So this will be 90s, 90s, possibly through 2000s. It's not all film. Some of it, there's like, Hannibal. I love Hannibal.
Have you seen Indecent Proposal?
No, I get mixed up with that and Basic Instinct and Fatal Attraction.
Yeah, just all those 90s erotic thrillers. Indecent Proposal has a completely out of the blue British comedian cameo. I won't
Lee Evans.
spoil yet.
Surely it's Lee Evans.
It's not Lee Evans.
It's not Lee Evans?
Yeah, but
Gervais.
I'll let you wait till you see it.
Maybe it was band era Gervais.
That's the thing, I've seen Indecent Proposal, but I can't think of a British comedian cameo.
They go to a comic shop, it's Bill Bailey.
I didn't get as many books as either Marlon or Louis. I don't know what that says about me. So instead I'm just going to share two books that were already in my bag. The Mysteries of Pittsburgh, the first novel by Michael Chabon. His later book, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, is my favourite novel. This is his juvenilia that he wrote as his MFA and was then submitted to a publisher without his knowing, and then he got like a $100,000 advance for it. And it's about a bisexual character, and I thought it was going to be in a sexy way, but it's actually in quite a homophobic way. So I don't recommend.
Is it a couldn't make his mind up sort of situation?
Yeah, it's a kind of bi-curious, but I guess the main homophobia comes from the girl who he's entangled with at the same time as he's entangled as a guy who is one of her friends. And she is I wouldn't say the book is homophobic, but it quite prominently features a very homophobic woman being like, how dare you sleep with these disgusting fags? Your penis should only go one place and that's inside me. How can you do this to me? And I don't know if that's actually what people were like in the late 80s, but that's what her character is.
That's what my mum says.
Another David Lodge, this time a non-fiction book, The Novelist at the Crossroads. Guessing he's going to be talking about his work more so than The Language of Fiction, which he wrote in the 60s. This is a bit of a more recent one. Pretty sure it's from the 80s.
Is he still alive?
He's still alive. He's probably in his early 90s now.
Do you have anything to say to him if he's watching?
I'd love to see another one.
Bud Schulberg is a novelist I've heard a lot about. He wrote What Makes Sammy Run and On the Waterfront, famous. So a couple of things, also The Natural, which is a baseball story. This was in the first shop we went in, had a section which was just mostly novels about boxing. Hello. Pigeons have been into me lately. The first shop we went into had a whole section of boxing novels. And this is The Harder They Fall, which is like I'm pretty sure they made a movie of it as well, about a boxer. They called him Man Mountain Toro, the gentle giant from the Andes. He was a modern Samson who was made by the fixers into a heavyweight champion. But as soon as he lost the one fight that wasn't fixed, they destroyed him. All of his novels seem to be kind of like, from a labour perspective, social perspective, but about industries that are sort of more, I don't know, supposedly glamorous, like organised sports, is that a phrase?
Speaking of bisexuals, Hollywood by Gore Vidal. He wrote a number of books which he put in a kind of a loose series that he called the American Empire series. And these went right from like the Revolutionary War up until, I believe this is the final one, and it starts in 1917, and it's about both the US being on the brink of entering World War I and also Hollywood developing as an industry. So I like stuff about early Hollywood. This is even pre something like Singing in the Rain. This is like real silent era, but it's about the establishment of the film industry out in California, which was still kind of, a lot of it was not populated by settlers. And I saw Caligula yesterday, which Gore Vidal wrote the initial draft of before removing his name entirely because he was so furious at what they'd done to it. So I've got kind of Gore Vidal and the film industry on the brain.
Do you have a top 3 pre-1960 Hollywood films?
The Apartment is just on the cusp, so I won't include that. It Happened One Night, I think, is incredible. It's just post Hays Code, but it kind of has a bit of an energy to it where its depiction of a kind of two people who are not married but still in a relationship does still actually feel quite fresh, even for like the 2020s. Casablanca, obviously. Any Hitchcocks? North by Northwest? Rebecca? How to Marry a Millionaire?
3 anuses today.
No, it sounded like you said anuses.
I found 3 anuses today. Yeah, what have we got? We've got to Take a Girl Like You, again, probably about some dusty academic finding a young girl who changes his life.
Is that not the same one you bought in the first video?
No, that was... We've talked about my lack of cataloguing, haven't we? Amos and Lodge, they knew each other, I believe. Lodge can't be considered one of the angry young men, as Kingsley Amos can.
He was just happy. You couldn't catch him on a bad day, that guy.
Couldn't get a rise out of him, could you? The Devil in the White City. This is true crime, but it was 100 years ago, so it's okay. H.H. Holmes was the name of a man. He ran a hotel in Chicago in like the late 1800s in the build-up to the World's Fair, which is basically a massive festival, and it was a murder hotel in which he built like custom rooms and chambers to live out his murderous wishes. And the main reason I've heard of it is because for a long time Scorsese was developing it as a film, and it was to star Leo DiCaprio. Leo, we're close.
Really kept in touch since you turned 26, though.
Yeah. I miss him. I think of him still. I think of him often. I thought it was going to be like, his next thing after like a long while, and then it's Killers of the Flowers Moon. Killers of the Flowers Moon. So I don't know if he's still working on it, but
This is pretty dry. This is from the downstairs of Judge Books, which is a lot of history, politics, sociology, stuff like that. This is called...
You went down there a long
I was down there for a long time.
I went to the pub.
Yeah. This is called Revolutions Without Borders. I'm somebody who, I know that I should have read The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. I know I should read that new book, Black Spartacus, about Toussaint Louverture, all these very important, weighty books about the Haitian Revolution. I'm just quite lazy. And so this is a book that in, only that amount of time talks about the Haitian Revolution, but also the American, the French, Sierra Leone, Poland, lots of different revolutions that were happening in late 18th century. And what I like about nonfiction like this is that even though this one is pretty slim, even when you get one that feels a bit thick, you remember there's loads of footnotes and an index at the back, and then that cuts out about 45 pages.
Especially on Kindle, you get that as a jump scare.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of angry young men and Academy novelists, another one of those, Malcolm Bradbury. When I'm book foraging, I just look for books that have been mentioned by other writers because I think in those recommendations are good stock.
Malcolm Bradbury famously founded the University of East Anglia creative writing course.
Pretty sure Ian McEwan was their only student for the first year. So,
I bet the long wintry evenings just flew by. I didn't know there was a book of this. It's the complete Alan Partridge scripts from both the radio and TV versions of Knowing Me, Knowing You, and all of I'm Alan Partridge. I had a big Steve Coogan thing recently where I just basically, if you want an oeuvre to really dip into, you can do Steve Coogan and not run out of material for weeks. His autobiography, did Philomena, rewatched a lot of The Day to Day, and you're just scratching the surface. The man's worked.
His turn as Jimmy Savile.
Yeah, not a brilliant miniseries, but the performance, you can't, well, you can comment.
Naguib Mahfouz is an Egyptian novelist who won the Nobel Prize. I believe the Nobel Prize for Literature is kind of given for your life's work or your body of work up until that point. So he didn't win it for any book in particular.
Didn't Bob Dylan get it?
He did get it in 2017, I think, something like that. Even though it's not given for a particular work, the one that he's most well known for is, I think, a kind of series of quite realist contemporary novels set, I think one's called the Shopkeeper of Cairo, something like that. My dad has one of them at least, and they look quite intimidating. But then when I saw this very slim volume, I was like, that sounds interesting. And what I find extremely interesting about it is that the plot is that a court is gathered within the halls of justice to judge all the rulers of Egypt going back to Osiris.
And when was that published?
This was published in 2009.
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. Naguib Mahfouz is obviously an Arab-Egyptian modern novelist, but tackling, the pre-Arab ancient Egyptian mythology and history, as well as, Anwar Sadat. And I guess this would have been just on the cusp of the revolution in Egypt. So I don't know if he kind of goes into that, and Mubarak would have probably been in power for the last 20-ish years when he wrote it.
Harold Pinter, I had a reading project recently in which I tried to read as many short pieces as I possibly could, and one of them was Old Times by Pinter, and I was surprised not to have enjoyed it. I found it got quite impressionistic and just disjointed. So I just wanted to read some Pinter I hadn't, just to make sure that I am actually fond of the guy. I definitely enjoyed The Dumbwaiter. That was one I performed in.
I saw you perform The Dumbwaiter.
Yeah.
You were in the year above me at college. This was just before my year group were about to join the college. Some people who were sat behind us, who would, I would then meet and become, friendly with, said at the end of
The
Dumbwaiter,
I remember this.
I don't get what, did he kill him or what? To the point where I...
You couldn't contain yourself.
Angrily turned and said, it's ambiguous. And they looked at me strangely.
But this was screamed. It's ambiguous. I could hear you from the wings. It's ambiguous!
I was surprised to find this for so cheap. The last bookshop we went into had a lot of quite academic stuff for fairly cheap. Charlie Kaufman and Hollywood's merry band of pranksters, fabulists and dreamers. An excursion into the American New Wave. Don't think I need to say a lot about that. It seems to have individual chapters on different directors. Linklater, Kaufman obviously, David O. Russell. Does anyone like David O. Russell? Is anyone really into him? Spike Jonze, Wes Anderson, Sofia Coppola, Michel Gondry. These were my guys, from the same shop. Direct Cinema, observational documentary on the politics of the 60s. Direct Cinema, I haven't seen a lot of the films. A lot of them are quite difficult to track down unless you buy Criterion editions. The Maisels brothers and D.A. Pennebaker were these documentarians in the 60s who kind of pushed the form into what we know as documentary filmmaking today. Before that era, documentaries weren't much of a thing, and when they were, they felt kind of affected. Really early documentaries like Nanook of the North, and that one where Walt Disney killed a bunch of lemmings, all sort of fake.
You can't think of Nanook of the North, and even say it really without saying it in Mark Cousins' voice. Nanook of the North.
Nanook of the North. I want to like Mark Cousins so badly. On my special edition of Light Sleeper, the Paul Schrader film, there's a short film by Mark Cousins which is just him poking his camcorder around his flat while there's a voiceover going on which is, "Dear Paul Schrader, thank you for the film Light Sleeper. It means so much to me." I can't get on board with it.
This is probably the closest I had to an impulse purchase, which was just on leaving Judd Books after my maybe 40-minute trawl through the bottom floor. I came up looking dead on the film section, and I was like, let me just look at the film section one more time to make sure there's nothing that I've missed. And I was like, I've got to get a book on Derek Jarman. Talking about his films, Caravaggio, Jubilee, Edward II and Blue. I've only seen 3 of those, but I also like Wittgenstein.
I've read his diaries about his garden.
Yeah, his famous his garden in Dungeness, real kind of queer pilgrimage in the UK.
John Cheever, I don't have much to say. I just really enjoyed Falconer and I wanted some more Cheever. The Great Tradition by F.R. Leavis. Jane Austen, George Eliot, James and Conrad. There are no novelists in English worth reading apart from those 4. Good on you, Leavis. That's quite the view to have.
This is one of the more expensive purchases of the day because it's basically new, and it is a non-fiction book, Entangled Life, How Fungi Make Our Worlds, Change Our Minds and Shape Our Futures. I don't want to get all twee, but I can't really describe this without using the phrase special interest. One of my first ones as a child was fungi and mushrooms. I can't explain why. It's not something that most 9-year-olds would be interested in, and yet I decided it was.
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
Which bookshop was that and how much was it?
This is the first bookshop, which was Boomcat Books. Wasn't supposed to be the first bookshop, but, you know, time makes fools of us all. And it was £8, which is...
That exact book was in Judd, and I think most of their things, I don't think anything there was above £6.95 for non-fiction. It's like £2 and £5.
Cold Comfort Farm, Stella Gibbons. I was in a play of this, which Louis saw. I was in this theatre group where lines were not memorised, as one expects of a play, to the point where I, who had all my lines memorised, was induced to forget them by everyone else's forgetting their own lines. But Cold Comfort Farm is a brilliant novel. It's like a parody, almost, of like the rural novels of the sort of 1700s.
My partner Kathy read this recently and said that it's a parody of something which has really not maintained
survived.
well
Yeah,
in the public consciousness.
there's elements of like Austen and those sorts of things, but it's more about the rural novels.
Yeah, even a bit tested the other books.
Hardy, yeah.
More
So there's a bit of Hardy in it, but also there was one author who I think kept going until like the sort of 50s and 60s, who is also an element of it. It's not set in a real place, but it's parodying Sussex, which I've got some other Sussex books. I've got kind of an obsession with Sussex, and it invents its own sort of fake dialect, which still in my head gets mixed up with real Sussex dialect. Particularly the "I'm going to" becomes "I mun." They don't actually say that in Sussex, but when I think in that like voice of like an old farmer, I'm like, I mun tend my own field, you know, that sort of thing.
I was in Vienna recently with my partner Kathy. We had a very nice time. Vienna 1900 is very much like a tagline. There was a big exhibition at the main museum about it, and it's very much there like Weimar Berlin. It's the like everyone's happy and gay and modernist and, you know, gay in both senses really, you know, new ideas about love and marriage and sexuality and art, and everything's going very well, and there's a terrible war on the horizon. Socialists and Jews and lots of other minorities are under threat, but they don't necessarily know it yet because everyone's having an amazing time going to all these cabarets. And this is the milieu in which Arthur Schnitzler was writing. I took a bit of a punt because it was a good price, and these stories are all pretty short. None of them seem to be more than about 20 pages long.
Another book by a literary critic, Harold Bloom. I got a book about Sylvia Plath by Jacqueline Rose, who was in an episode of In Our Time. Alongside Harold Bloom, they were having a discussion, or a debate rather, about the value of literary studies, how it should be done, why it should be done. That's a great episode of In Our Time. Jonathan Bate is often on Radio 4's In Our Time. Again, another wonderful guest, and I'd like to own more by him.
I don't know anything about this novelist. I just like Bigfoot and picked it up, and the premise appeals to me. Vera, the bright, edgy heroine of Bigfoot Dreams, works for a sleazy supermarket tabloid for which she writes stories about UFO sightings, miracle cures in humble garden vegetables, new evidence of life after death, and the ever-popular Bigfoot. It's just like a drama about a woman who writes for like Weekly World News. Have you heard of this? It's like it's got the title of an actual newspaper, but it's like Bigfoot and UFOs and...
I'm an alien.
Yeah, exactly. Bat Boy in Edward Scissorhands. This has always stuck out to me. It's not brought up in the script or anything, but when you meet Edward Scissorhands and you find like the room he's been living in, he has pictures of Bat Boy up from the Weekly World News. I thought that was great, like world building, set design.
Isaac Bashevis Singer was a Yiddish writer who wrote the story, or possibly stories, that were adapted into an amazing film, Yentl, directed by Barbara Streisand and starring, of course. So I believe he wrote in Yiddish, born in Poland in 1904. But yeah, a lot of his work kind of takes place in kind of that early 20th century Jewish Eastern Europe, the world of the shtetl and rabbis and things of this nature. It's got a good kind of tagline on the front. Oh, this is kind of set quite a lot earlier, I didn't realise, but it is 1665, and the false messiah has come to Gore, a society to be destroyed by heresy, superstition, and fear. Someone claiming to be the Jewish messiah has arrived, and we're going to see how the local Jewish population responds to that.
That looks good. I'm going to have
Yeah.
Give one back. Did you know Joe Orton wrote a novel? Because I didn't. For adult minds only. Does this count, do you think, as one of my weird sex books?
The cover shows what looks like Barbara Streisand's head.
or Mick Hucknall. Those are long toes. That's not healthy. The complete plays. This is one of my I wanted to finds today. You know, I never expect to find anything because who am I to play God? But I was hoping I would find the complete plays of Orton. To buy this new, it's like 18 quid. He's dead. He doesn't need the money.
Ruth Prawa Jabvala was the collaborator of James Ivory and Ismail Merchant. Really should get credit in the kind of their joint production company named Merchant Ivory, who made many great costume dramas of the late 70s, 80s and 90s. Morris, A Room with a View. They did not make Passage to India because that was David Lean, but they did make other films kind of set in colonial India and the Raj. She was born in Germany with Jewish parents, but she married an Indian man, I think, and so that's where her double-barreled name comes from. Oh, The Bostonians, Howard's End, The Remains of the Day. And so I did not know she was a novelist as well, but she's written this about the upper-class colonial society in British India.
B.S. Johnson, an experimental novelist from the 60s and 70s. House Mother Normal, this one's called. 8 residents in a home for the elderly sit down to dinner, along with the house mother herself. Each takes it in turn to relay the proceedings of the evening from their own individual perspective. He just sort of was very experimental with voice and perspective and structure as well. He wrote one novel which is only sold unbound in a box, and you're supposed to shuffle it before you read it, and all sorts of interesting stuff like that. So B.S. Johnson, who my friend Annie is particularly interested in, so I'll talk about this with Annie when I've read it.
My final book is the find of the day, the find of maybe the year in terms of book shopping. An author that I really admire combined with a topic that I think about every day. C.L.R. James, Trinidadian Marxist academic. I've already alluded to a book of his that I've not read, Black Jacobins, about the Haitian Revolution. He also wrote the best book about cricket, which is really doing it damn praise, because a lot of books about cricket are just autobiographies with titles that are puns on cricket terms, like No Spin by Shane Warne, or Opening Up by Mike Atherton, things like that. But Beyond the Boundary, an incredible book about...
Opening Up?
Because he was opening batsman.
Sounds filthy.
Yeah. But yeah, Beyond the Boundary was his book about cricket and its role in the Caribbean, and kind of the British colonialism and the education system and the idea of civilizing their empire with this, with this game. He wrote an entire book about Moby Dick.
Someone else did that.
I am evangelical about Moby Dick. In the summer of 2023, I was just like, you know what? Let me sit down with this 650-page book that I've heard is great, and I'm going to take it as long as it takes. I'll go really slowly. And I just couldn't believe from the first page how funny, how ecstatic, how homoerotic, how deeply spiritual it is. The way that it's written at this point where we're on the cusp of kind of modern biology, but not quite there yet. Ishmael, the character, gets to say things like, a lot of people are now saying that whales are mammals because they have lungs. I don't believe that. I think they're still fish. I think people always talk about it. I think it's a popular book you have to read in high school in America, and people always say, oh, what a boring book, all these, pages about whale anatomy. But the way that Melville does the whale anatomy is he's like, sperm whales have one eye on this side and one eye on that side, and there's like 40 feet between them. Imagine seeing the world like that, and it's so beautiful. I've not even read the blurb of this. I just saw C.L.R. James and Moby Dick, and I can't wait. A brilliant and original study contends that Melville's great novel presents the first sustained critique in literature of the industrialized world and the impulse towards totalitarianism. I can't wait. As a result of being into Moby Dick, I'm now very into the story of Jonah and the whale from the Bible. Lots of parables in the Bible that, and even like some of the Psalms, just deal with shipwrecks and being at sea. And it was just obviously a massive part of human life and industry, and still is. And I guess he'll go into this. A fact that people often bring up is that just before the discovery of crude oil on a major scale, whale oil was like the biggest commodity in the world. And it was just this thing. Yeah, there are several passages and sections and images of Moby Dick that I just think are so beautiful, and just at the cusp of the world not being at the point where men would just go on ships and leave their wives and children and just be like, I'll see you in 3 years, maybe I'll die out there, we'll see. And that extremely lonely world of the merchant or the trawler or the at-sea hunter or anything. And I can't wait to see how C.L.R. James analysed that in terms of how the world moves towards industrialisation.
10 years ago, when the Mastodon roamed the earth and there were 5-person daily collab channels on YouTube, the three of us came to the exterior location of the sitcom Black Books.
The interior is sort of there as well. parts of it are the same in the show, and then parts of it are like expanded.
Yeah.
The doorway is very similar, but there's a whole other chamber in the show that goes on back that way. But that was like one of the first things we realised we had in common was black books. So, what was the name of the big chain bookshop that came in?
Oh, Saga Books.
Saga Books.
Not Saga Books, Goliath Books.
Goliath Books, yeah.
Saga Books was the one in season 2.
I've got a duty to do.
I've got a duty to do.
You should watch Black Books, folks. Oh, what a day.
What a day, what a lovely day.